When Jungkook discovers Jimin and Taehyung's cold indifference towards him, jealousy ignites into fury, unraveling secrets that threaten their unbreakable bond. Did you forget about me? Jungkook's voice sliced through the heavy silence of the practice room, raw and edged with disbelief. His fists clenched at his sides, knuckles white under the stark fluorescent lights. Across the room, Jimin and Taehyung exchanged glances, quick, subtle, almost imperceptible, but Jungkook caught it. His eyes darkened. Taehyung's gaze flickered away, his lips curving into a smile that was too smooth, too practiced. Forget about you? Don't be dramatic, Kook, he replied, stretching his arms leisurely as if the tension in the room was nothing but a passing breeze. Jimin, standing beside him, said nothing. His eyes were locked on his phone, thumbs scrolling with deliberate indifference. Jungkook stepped forward, his footsteps echoing with restrained fury. I'm serious. What's going on with you two? His voice grew louder, splintering the fragile calm. He searched their faces for a crack in the facade, anything to reassure him that he was just overthinking. But there was nothing, just the same practiced expressions, the same hollow smiles. Jimin finally looked up, his eyes meeting Jungkook's with a flash of something unreadable. We've been busy. Not everything revolves around you, you know, he replied coolly, shoving his phone into his pocket. We all have our own things going on. The words stung, sharper than Jungkook had anticipated. His jaw tightened. Since when did your own things mean ignoring me for days? Since when did we stop talking about everything? We used to, he stopped himself, shaking his head. His heartbeat was drumming in his ears, the weight of unspoken words pressing against his chest. Taehyung ran a hand through his hair, sighing dramatically. You're being paranoid. We're just busy. Things are different now. That's all. His voice was soft but distant, as if he was speaking to someone far away. Jungkook stared at him, searching for the familiar warmth in Taehyung's eyes, the spark that always made him feel like he belonged. But it wasn't there. Not anymore. Silence stretched between them, thick and suffocating. Jungkook's hands dropped to his sides, his fingers twitching with the urge to grab them both, shake them until the truth spilled out. But he held back, swallowing the ache that rose in his throat. Fine, he said, voice low and rough. If that's how it is. He turned on his heel, boots pounding against the floor as he stormed out of the room. His mind was a swirl of questions and doubts, the laughter of Jimin and Taehyung echoing faintly behind him, muted like he was hearing it through a wall. He didn't stop until he was outside, the cool night air slapping his face, grounding him back to reality. His fists remained clenched, the tension in his shoulders refusing to fade. Jungkook sucked in a breath, eyes scanning the darkened city skyline. His mind replayed their dismissive smiles, the way they looked at each other with secrets unspoken, leaving him on the outside like a mere spectator. It wasn't just busyness. He knew that much. Something had changed, something vital and unspoken, threading its way between the three of them, unraveling the connection that had once felt unbreakable. He took out his phone, fingers hovering over Taehyung's name. For a moment he hesitated, his mind warring between pride and desperation. But before he could decide, the screen flashed with a message from Taehyung. Don't overthink it. We're good. See you tomorrow. Jungkook stared at the text, his breath hitching slightly. There was a comfort in the words, a sense of normalcy. But beneath the surface he felt the crack widening, stretching, threatening to shatter everything they had built. His thumb hovered over the reply button before he locked the screen, slipping the phone back into his pocket. The wind whipped around him, cool and biting, whispering doubts into his ears. He set his jaw, eyes fixed on the distant lights shimmering like fractured stars. He wouldn't let this slide, not this time. Whatever was happening between Jimin and Taehyung, whatever secret glances and whispered conversations they were sharing, he would find out. And when he did, nothing would be the same. The rain poured heavily, relentless and unforgiving, drumming against the windows of the practice room. Jungkook stood in the corner, his eyes fixed on the glass, watching as droplets chased each other down in chaotic lines. His reflection stared back, tense shoulders, clenched jaw, eyes sharp with something darker than mere frustration. Behind him, Jimin and Taehyung laughed, their voices soft and familiar, like a private melody shared only between the two of them. Jungkook's fists tightened. He'd been watching them all morning, noting the exchanged smiles, the whispered jokes that didn't include him, the way Taehyung would lean in just a little too close when Jimin spoke, their laughter echoing like ghosts of something once beautiful and now twisted. He tried to shake it off, tried to convince himself that it was just paranoia gnawing at him, festering in the cracks of their friendship. But the feeling lingered, heavy and suffocating, impossible to ignore. Hey, Jungkook's voice cut through the room, sharper than he intended. The laughter stopped. Jimin looked up, his smile fading as he met Jungkook's gaze. Taehyung's hand paused mid-gesture, his eyes flickering with something unspoken before he, too, fell silent. What's up? Taehyung's voice was soft, almost careful as if stepping around broken glass. Jungkook's eyes narrowed. Are you two gonna tell me what's going on, or do I have to guess? His tone was edged with steel, unyielding. He took a step forward and neither of them moved. Jimin's eyes darted to Taehyung, a flash of concern crossing his features before he masked it with a grin that didn't quite reach his eyes. What do you mean? Jimin asked, slipping his hands into his pockets casually. Too casually. Jungkook laughed, a hollow, humorless sound. You know exactly what I mean. You've been avoiding me for weeks now. Talking behind my back, disappearing together, acting like I'm not even here. His voice rose with every word, the room echoing with the force of his accusations. Don't act like I'm blind. Taehyung straightened, his expression hardening. We're not avoiding you, Jungkook. You're just being dramatic. Things change, people get busy. His tone was flat, practiced, like he'd rehearsed the lines 100 times before speaking them. Jungkook's eyes flashed with disbelief. Busy? That's your excuse? You can't even look me in the eye and say it. What the hell happened to us, huh? Since when did I become some stranger to you too? His voice cracked, just barely, but enough to betray the hurt threading through his anger. Jimin shifted uncomfortably, his eyes casting down to the floor. It's not like that, he murmured, but there was no conviction in his voice. Then what is it like? Jungkook pressed, stepping forward again, the space between them shrinking. Tell me why the two of you have been whispering and laughing without me. Why you disappear right after practice and leave me behind like I'm nothing. His breath was ragged, fists trembling at his sides. We promised each other, didn't we? No secrets. Taehyung's jaw clenched, his hands flexing at his sides. Things are complicated, Jungkook. Not everything's about you, he spat, the words cutting through the air like shards of glass. Jungkook's eyes darkened and he stepped even closer until they were almost nose to nose. Then make me understand. Help me get it, because right now it feels like I'm losing both of you and you don't even care. His voice dropped to a whisper, rough and broken. Do you even care? Jimin's head snapped up, eyes wide with surprise, his mouth opening as if to speak, but no words came. He turned to Taehyung, searching for something, reassurance, confidence, maybe permission. But Taehyung only stared back, his expression unreadable, locked away behind walls Jungkook didn't recognize. The silence stretched, suffocating and heavy, until finally Taehyung broke it with a scoff. You're making this bigger than it is. Maybe if you stopped being so paranoid, you'd see that nothing's changed. His words were clipped, final, like a door slamming shut. Jungkook flinched, stepping back as if struck. He searched their faces, desperate for any sign of the friends he once knew. But there was only distance. Only walls. His chest tightened, the ache spreading like poison, sharp and unyielding. Fine, he whispered, voice barely audible. If that's how you feel. Jimin took a step forward, his hand reaching out instinctively. Kook, wait. But Jungkook was already turning, his footsteps heavy and deliberate as he walked away, his shoulders rigid with tension. He didn't stop when Jimin called his name again, didn't pause when he heard Taehyung mutter something sharp and hushed behind him. He kept moving, the practice room fading into silence as he pushed through the doors and into the hallway, the cool air biting at his flushed skin. His footsteps echoed loudly, each step punctuated by the rapid thudding of his heart. He clenched his fists, jaw set tight as he walked faster, nearly jogging down the hallway. It wasn't until he reached the emergency stairwell that he stopped, leaning back against the cold concrete wall and letting out a ragged breath. For a moment, there was only the sound of his breathing, harsh and unsteady, the echoes bouncing off the walls in an unforgiving rhythm. He squeezed his eyes shut, pressing the heels of his palms against them, willing the pressure in his chest to fade. But it didn't. It grew, twisting and coiling until he felt like he might explode. With a growl of frustration, Jungkook slammed his fist into the wall beside him, the impact reverberating through his bones. Pain flared up his knuckles, sharp and bright, but it was grounding, solid. Real. He stared at the cracks that spiderwebbed across the paint, his breath coming in shallow bursts. His mind replayed the scene in the practice room, the shared glances, the soft laughter, the way Jimin had reached for Taehyung without hesitation, like it was the most natural thing in the world. His hand curled into a fist again, nails biting into his palm. He didn't understand. He couldn't understand. And that's what terrified him the most. As he stood there, chest heaving, eyes burning with unshed frustration, his phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out, glancing at the screen. A message from Jimin. We need to talk. Just you and me. Tonight? Jungkook stared at the message, his mind racing. His thumb hovered over the screen, heart pounding in his chest. Was this it? Was this finally the answer he was looking for? Or was it another lie, another curtain pulled over his eyes to keep him in the dark? He sucked in a breath, steeling himself before typing back a single word. Fine. He locked his phone, sliding it back into his pocket. His hands still shook, the adrenaline coursing through his veins refusing to fade. But now there was something else there, too, an ember of hope flickering faintly amidst the storm. Tonight, he would get answers. One way or another. The rain continued to fall outside, relentless and unyielding, pounding against the pavement like a heartbeat. The city lights flickered under the veil of night as Jungkook stepped out of the building, his breath fogging in the chill of the evening air. His mind was a whirlwind of questions, doubts clinging to him like shadows as he walked towards the cafe where Jimin had asked to meet. The message still lingered on his phone, stark and unyielding, taunting him with promises of answers. His fingers twitched in his pockets, the anxiety thrumming just beneath his skin. He reached the cafe, a small, dimly lit corner spot they used to go to after late practices, back when everything was simple. Back when they were inseparable. He pushed the door open, a soft chime ringing above him, and the familiar scent of roasted coffee beans filled his senses. His eyes scanned the room, locking on Jimin, who was seated by the window, his hands wrapped around a steaming cup. Jimin looked up, catching his eye, and offered a tentative smile. Jungkook hesitated before walking over, his footsteps slow and deliberate. He slid into the seat across from Jimin, folding his hands on the table, gaze sharp and unyielding. Jimin set his cup down, his fingers lingering on the ceramic as if seeking comfort. "I'm glad you came," Jimin started, voice soft, almost hesitant. Jungkook didn't respond, his eyes never leaving Jimin's face. Seconds stretched between them, thick with silence and unspoken tension. Finally, Jimin sighed, his shoulders sagging just slightly. I guess I owe you an explanation." Jungkook's jaw tightened. "I think you do," he replied evenly, his voice barely above a whisper but laced with steel. "You and Taehyung have been different. Cold. And I want to know why." His eyes flashed with something raw, something fragile that he barely contained. "We used to tell each other everything, Jimin. So, what happened?" Jimin's eyes flickered with something, regret, guilt, maybe both. He leaned back, exhaling slowly. "It's not that simple," he murmured, his gaze dropping to his hands. Things got complicated." Jungkook leaned forward, voice sharper now. "Complicated how?" "You say that but you never explain." "I'm not stupid, Jimin. I see how you look at each other. I see the way you talk when you think I'm not paying attention. Like I'm some outsider." His hands clenched on the table, knuckles whitening. "I'm tired of being kept in the dark." Jimin's eyes snapped back up, a flash of frustration sparking in them. "And what do you want me to say, huh?" His voice rose slightly, drawing glances from nearby tables. He didn't seem to care. "You want me to tell you that everything's fine? That nothing's changed? Because I can't." "Things did change, Jungkook. They changed and you weren't paying attention." His words hung heavy between them, each syllable hitting like a blow. Jungkook flinched, his expression cracking just a bit. "I wasn't paying attention," he echoed, disbelief coloring his tone. "I'm the one who's been reaching out. I'm the one who's been trying to fix things while you and Taehyung just shut me out. How's that my fault?" Jimin's jaw clenched, his hands curling into fists on the table. "You don't get it," he whispered, voice shaking. "You don't see what's been happening because you don't want to. You're so wrapped up in your own world that you didn't even notice when everything started falling apart." Jungkook's eyes flared with anger, his voice low and dangerous. "Then explain it to me. Make me understand, Jimin. If I missed something, then tell me what it is. Or are you just going to keep shutting me out?" His voice wavered at the end, the vulnerability slipping through his defenses. Jimin looked away, his gaze distant as if searching for the right words in the rain-streaked glass of the window. He swallowed hard before speaking, his voice softer, almost a whisper. "You and Taehyung, you two were always so close. It felt like I was the third wheel for so long. And then things shifted. He started pulling away from you and towards me." He paused, his breath hitching slightly. "I didn't know how to tell you. I didn't even understand it myself." Jungkook stared at him, the weight of Jimin's confession settling like lead in his stomach. "Pulling away from me?" he repeated, disbelief warring with pain. "Taehyung? Are you saying that?" His words faltered, his mind racing to piece together the fragments of memories, the glances, the whispers, the sudden absences. Jimin's eyes were wet when he looked back at him. "I didn't mean for it to happen," he confessed, voice cracking. "We tried to keep things normal. For you. For all of us. But it got harder to hide and I guess we just pulled away instead. We didn't want you to find out like this." Jungkook recoiled as if struck, his chair scraping loudly against the wooden floor. His breath came in shallow gasps, fists trembling against the table. "So that's it?" His voice was shaking, raw with hurt and disbelief. You and Taehyung? Behind my back. Jimin flinched, his eyes falling back to his hands. It wasn't behind your back. Not at first. It just happened. It just happened? Jungkook repeated, voice rising. Several patrons turned their heads, watching the scene unfold with hushed whispers. Jungkook didn't care. He leaned forward, eyes blazing. You call this friendship? You call this loyalty? You lied to me, both of you. You pushed me out like I didn't matter. Jimin's eyes filled with tears, spilling over silently as he wiped at them with the back of his hand. I'm sorry, he whispered, voice breaking. I didn't know how to tell you. I didn't want to lose you. Jungkook laughed bitterly, the sound hollow and sharp. You already did, Jimin. You did the second you started lying to me. He pushed back from the table, his movements sharp and unyielding. Jimin reached out instinctively, fingers grazing Jungkook's arm. Wait, please. Let me explain. Jungkook shook him off, stepping back, his eyes hard and unyielding. Explain what? That you and Taehyung decided I wasn't good enough anymore? That you replaced me? I don't need to hear it. His voice cracked on the last word, but he didn't falter. He turned, the door slamming behind him as he stepped back into the rain, the cold biting against his skin, mingling with the hot sting of betrayal coursing through his veins. He walked aimlessly, the city lights blurring around him, his mind replaying every glance, every whisper, every hollow smile they had shared in secret. His fists clenched and unclenched at his sides, the rain masking the tears that slipped silently down his cheeks. Beneath the roar of thunder and the endless fall of rain, Jungkook's resolve hardened. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. If they thought they could cut him out, they were wrong. He would find out everything. Every secret, every whisper, every shadow they hid behind. And when he did, the world they had so carefully constructed would come crashing down. And this time, he wouldn't be the one left behind. The rain had stopped, leaving behind glistening streets and puddles that reflected the dim glow of the city lights. Jungkook stood beneath the awning of a convenience store, his hood pulled over his head, shadows casting harsh lines across his face. His hands were buried deep in his pockets, fists clenched so tightly his knuckles ached. He replayed the conversation with Jimin in his mind, each word slicing deeper, the betrayal festering like an open wound. He could still hear Jimin's voice, soft and broken. We didn't want you to find out like this. Jungkook let out a bitter laugh, the sound sharp and hollow. How else was he supposed to find out? Were they planning to keep it a secret forever? Or worse, had they hoped he'd just fade away quietly, accepting the distance as if it were natural? His jaw clenched at the thought, anger sparking hot and bright behind his eyes. His phone buzzed in his pocket, snapping him out of his thoughts. He pulled it out, glancing at the screen. A message from Taehyung. For a moment, Jungkook just stared at it, his breath catching in his throat. His thumb hovered over the screen before he finally unlocked it. We need to talk. My place. Now. Jungkook's heart thudded painfully, his mind racing with possibilities. Part of him wanted to ignore it, let them stew in the mess they'd made. But another part, the part that still ached with raw betrayal, wanted answers. He wanted to look Taehyung in the eye and hear him say it. Hear him confess. His grip tightened on the phone, fingers trembling slightly. His thumb typed out a quick reply, on my way. The city blurred around him as he walked, the cool night air biting at his cheeks, his footsteps steady and unyielding. Taehyung lived just a few blocks away in a sleek high-rise with floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the bustling city. Jungkook had been there countless times, movie nights sprawled on the couch, late-night ramen marathons, lazy Sunday mornings where everything felt easy and right. Now, the thought of walking through that door made his stomach twist. He reached the building faster than he'd anticipated, his breath fogging in the chilled air as he approached the entrance. The doorman recognized him immediately, offering a nod and holding the door open. Jungkook mumbled a thank you, his voice tight and clipped. He didn't wait for the elevator, instead opting for the stairs, the climb grounding him, burning away some of the nervous energy clawing at his veins. When he reached Taehyung's floor, he paused, his hand hovering just above the door before he knocked. His knuckles hit the wood sharply 3 times, the sound echoing down the hallway. He could hear footsteps on the other side, the soft shuffle of socks against hardwood, and then the door swung open. Taehyung stood there, hair tousled and eyes shadowed with something unreadable. He wore a loose sweater and joggers, his frame relaxed but his eyes sharp, watching Jungkook with a carefulness that set his teeth on edge. For a moment, neither of them spoke, the tension simmering between them, thick and suffocating. Come in, Taehyung finally said, stepping aside. Jungkook hesitated before crossing the threshold, the familiar scent of cedar and vanilla washing over him. It felt wrong, like stepping into the past, into memories that no longer belonged to him. He forced his shoulders back, head held high as he moved into the living room. He heard the door click shut behind him, the lock sliding into place with a finality that sent a shiver down his spine. Taehyung walked past him, moving to the kitchen and pulling 2 glasses from the cabinet. "Water?" he asked, his voice even. "No," Jungkook's response was sharp, cutting. "I'm not here to drink water, Taehyung. I'm here for answers." Taehyung paused, his back still turned, hands bracing against the counter. For a moment he didn't speak, and Jungkook's patience snapped. "Are you just going to ignore me too? Or is that Jimin's job now?" Taehyung's shoulders tensed, his head dropping slightly before he turned around, glass still in hand. His eyes were hard, unyielding. "You want to talk? Fine. Let's talk." He crossed the room, setting the glass down on the coffee table before dropping onto the couch, legs sprawled out comfortably. He looked up at Jungkook, one eyebrow raised. "Ask me anything. I'm done hiding." Jungkook's eyes narrowed, fists still clenched at his sides. "How long?" he asked, voice low and shaking. "How long have you been lying to me?" Taehyung's gaze didn't waver. 3 months. His answer was clean, direct, like ripping off a bandage. Jungkook flinched, the words hitting harder than he'd expected. 3 months, he repeated, his voice barely above a whisper. "You've been sneaking around with Jimin for 3 months and neither of you said a damn thing?" Taehyung's expression softened just slightly. "It wasn't like that," he murmured. "It started off different. We didn't mean to keep it from you. We were just trying to figure it out. Trying to understand what it even was." His eyes flickered with something raw, something vulnerable. "I didn't want you to get hurt." Jungkook laughed bitterly, the sound harsh and jagged. "Well, congratulations. Mission failed." His fists tightened, knuckles cracking under the pressure. "You shut me out. Both of you. You kept me in the dark like I wasn't part of this anymore. Like I didn't matter." Taehyung's jaw clenched, his eyes flashing with something darker. "You mattered. You always mattered, Jungkook. But things got complicated. Jimin and I, we just clicked. It wasn't planned. It wasn't meant to happen like this." His voice broke slightly and he looked away, gaze dropping to the floor. Jungkook took a step forward, voice cracking. "You should have told me. I had to find out from Jimin in some goddamn cafe while he cried over his coffee." He sucked in a breath, trying to steady himself. "Do you have any idea how that felt? To realize you two have been lying to my face for months." Taehyung's eyes snapped back up, sharp and unyielding. "Do you have any idea how hard it was to hide it? How many times I wanted to tell you, but I couldn't. I didn't want to lose you, Jungkook. I still don't." His voice was shaking now, raw and open in a way Jungkook hadn't seen in a long time. Jungkook's lips pressed into a thin line, his eyes blazing. "Well, you did. You both did." His voice was flat, final. Taehyung flinched as if struck, the pain flashing across his features before he masked it. "So, that's it then?" he whispered. "You're just done." Jungkook stared at him, the memories flashing like ghosts between them, midnight runs to the convenience store, movie marathons sprawled across the living room floor, late-night confessions whispered under the blanket of darkness. His chest tightened, the ache spreading until he could hardly breathe. "I'm done being lied to," he replied, his voice cracking just slightly. He turned, his footsteps heavy and deliberate, each step a fracture in something once unbreakable. He reached the door, hand on the handle, pausing just once to look back. Taehyung was still sitting on the couch, hands clenched in his lap, eyes dark and haunted. He opened his mouth as if to say something, but no words came. Jungkook waited, just for a second. But the silence stretched, heavy and unyielding, until he couldn't stand it anymore. He pulled the door open, stepping back into the hallway, the cool air hitting his face like a slap. He didn't look back. He couldn't. His footsteps echoed off the walls, fading into silence as the door clicked shut behind him. But the echoes of that night would linger, ghost-like and unyielding, weaving through their memories, binding them with threads of regret and betrayal that not even time could sever. The wind whipped through the narrow streets of Seoul, biting against Jungkook's cheeks as he walked with hurried footsteps. His breath came out in ragged clouds of fog, and his fists were stuffed deep into the pockets of his jacket. It had been 2 weeks since the confrontation with Taehyung, 2 weeks since the truth had shattered the illusion of their friendship, and 2 weeks of deafening silence. Jimin hadn't called. Taehyung hadn't texted. It was as if they had evaporated from his life, leaving nothing but echoes where laughter used to be. Jungkook swallowed hard, forcing the knot in his throat down as he approached the practice building. He knew they would be there, Taehyung and Jimin. They always were, even now, even after everything. His hand hovered over the glass door before he pushed it open, the rush of warm air hitting him like a wave. He stepped inside, shoulders squared, eyes hard. He made his way up the stairs, each step heavier than the last. He could hear the faint thrum of music pulsing through the walls, muffled and distant, but unmistakable. His heart quickened. His palms were sweating and he wiped them against his jeans before reaching the practice room door. He didn't knock. He never used to. Why start now? The door swung open with a creak and the music spilled out into the hallway, louder and sharper. Taehyung and Jimin were in the middle of a routine, bodies moving in perfect synchronization, sweat glistening on their foreheads. For a moment, Jungkook stood there, frozen, watching them. They hadn't seen him yet, too wrapped up in the rhythm in each other. His chest tightened. He cleared his throat loudly, the sound slicing through the music like a blade. Jimin stumbled mid-step, nearly tripping over his own feet before he caught himself. Taehyung stopped too, turning towards the door, eyes wide with surprise. For a moment, the three of them just stared at each other, the silence stretching taut and suffocating. Jungkook stepped inside, letting the door swing shut behind him. His eyes were locked on Taehyung, sharp and unyielding. "We need to talk," he said, voice rough and steady. Taehyung swallowed, glancing at Jimin, whose eyes were already brimming with tears. "Now?" Taehyung asked, voice barely above a whisper. Jungkook's jaw clenched. "Now." Jimin's hands twisted together, his eyes flickering between the two of them nervously. Maybe I should go," he murmured, already stepping towards the door. His voice cracked slightly, the tremor of uncertainty threaded through it. Jungkook's gaze flicked to him, sharp and unwavering. "No. You stay." His eyes moved back to Taehyung. "Both of you. I'm tired of the secrets. I'm tired of being left out." He took a step forward and neither of them moved. "I want the truth. All of it." Taehyung's eyes darkened, his jaw setting stubbornly. "We told you everything, Jungkook. What else do you want?" His voice was steady, almost defiant. Jungkook's fists clenched at his sides, his breath coming quicker. "I want to know why." His voice cracked on the last word, but he didn't falter. "Why you two shut me out? Why you didn't just tell me? Why it feels like I was the one who did something wrong?" Jimin's eyes filled with fresh tears, spilling over his cheeks as he shook his head. "You didn't do anything wrong," he whispered, voice shaking. It just happened. We didn't know how to tell you." His hands twisted together, fingers pale and trembling. Jungkook took another step forward, voice rising. "That's not good enough. You don't just forget your best friend. You don't just decide that he's not part of the picture anymore." His eyes flashed with hurt and betrayal. "I was there, you know. I was there through everything. And you didn't even give me the courtesy of knowing." Taehyung's hands curled into fists at his sides, his eyes hardening. "We didn't want to hurt you," he replied, voice taut with tension. "But you're making this harder than it has to be." Jungkook's eyes flared with disbelief. "I'm making it harder? I'm not the one who lied. I'm not the one who threw away years of friendship because it was inconvenient." His voice broke, but he powered through. "You replaced me. Just like that." Jimin stepped forward then, his hands shaking. "We didn't replace you," he insisted, voice cracking with desperation. Things just changed. It wasn't planned. We never meant for you to feel like this." Jungkook's gaze softened just a bit, his eyes searching Jimin's face for any sign of the friend he once knew. But the walls were still there, thick and impenetrable. His voice dropped, raw and exposed. "But I do feel like this, Jimin. Every day. Every time I see you two together. It's like I'm not even there. Like I don't matter." Taehyung stepped forward, voice firm. "You do matter." His eyes were sharp, unyielding. "We didn't know how to handle it. We didn't want you to feel left out. But," he paused, eyes flickering with something unreadable. "It just got messy." Jungkook laughed, the sound sharp and bitter. "Messy? That's what you call it." His fists clenched tighter, knuckles white. "You shut me out. You two became this thing. And I'm just supposed to be okay with that." Jimin took another step forward, his hands reaching out instinctively. "We're sorry, Jungkook," he whispered, voice cracking with emotion. "We never wanted to hurt you. We didn't know how to make it right." Jungkook's eyes met his, something fragile and broken shimmering just beneath the surface. "Then make it right," he whispered, voice barely above a whisper. "Because I can't keep doing this. I can't keep pretending like I don't care." Taehyung's eyes softened, his hands unclenching as he stepped closer, his voice dropping. "We'll fix it," he promised. Eyes locked on Jungkook's. "We'll find a way. I swear." For a moment, there was silence, heavy and suffocating. The three of them stood there, breaths mingling in the stillness, hearts hammering in their chests. The promise hung between them, fragile and tentative, but real. And for the first time in weeks, Jungkook allowed himself to breathe. He nodded, just slightly, the movement almost imperceptible. But it was enough. It was a start. Taehyung stepped forward, his hand clasping Jungkook's shoulder, firm and steady. Jimin moved closer, his eyes shimmering with unshed tears. They stood there, the three of them, the tension unraveling just a bit, the wound still raw but no longer festering in silence. Jungkook's eyes burned with unshed tears, his throat tight, but he didn't move. He let himself be held, just for a moment, just for the space of a heartbeat. He let himself believe that maybe, just maybe, they could find their way back to what they once were. But somewhere deep in his gut, that shadow of doubt still lingered, whispering that this was just the beginning of something far more dangerous. Something that words alone couldn't fix. And for the first time, he began to wonder if the truth was really worth the price he was paying. The sun dipped low on the horizon, casting long shadows across the polished floors of the practice room. Jungkook stood by the window, his hands stuffed deep into his pockets as he stared out at the city, his reflection fragmented by the streaks of sunlight slicing through the glass. He could hear footsteps behind him, soft and hesitant, but he didn't turn around. He knew who it was. "Hey!" Jimin's voice was soft, almost a whisper. Jungkook's shoulders stiffened, but he didn't respond. He kept his gaze fixed on the city below, eyes tracing the chaotic dance of lights and movement. Jimin stepped closer, the soft shuffle of his sneakers against the floor growing louder with each step. He stopped a few feet away, silence stretching between them, heavy and suffocating. I wanted to talk," Jimin continued, his voice barely carrying over the hum of the air conditioning. Jungkook's jaw clenched, his reflection tightening in the glass. He took a slow, measured breath before turning around, his eyes sharp and guarded. "About what?" His voice was steady, but there was an edge to it, a crackling tension simmering just beneath the surface. Jimin's hands twisted together nervously, his eyes flitting to the floor before meeting Jungkook's gaze. "About us. About what happened." He took a shaky breath, his hands stilling. I feel like we never really talked about it. Not properly." Jungkook let out a bitter laugh, the sound harsh and grating. "What's there to talk about, Jimin? You and Taehyung got together behind my back. You lied. You shut me out. I think that pretty much covers it." His voice grew sharper with each word, cutting through the air like glass. Jimin flinched, his eyes dropping back to the floor. "It wasn't like that," he whispered, voice cracking. "We didn't mean to hurt you. We didn't know how to handle it." Jungkook's eyes flashed with disbelief. "So you handled it by lying to me? By pretending like I didn't exist? You call that handling it?" His fists clenched at his sides, nails biting into his palms. Jimin took a step forward, his eyes pleading. "We were scared, Jungkook. We didn't want to lose you. We didn't know how to balance it all. We thought if we kept it quiet it would be easier." His voice broke, and his hands twisted together again, fingers pale and trembling. Jungkook stared at him, disbelief written clear across his features. "Easier?" he repeated, voice dripping with incredulity. "For who? Because it sure as hell wasn't easier for me. I had to watch you two slip away, little by little, every damn day. And you didn't even give me the courtesy of knowing why." Jimin's eyes shimmered with fresh tears, and he took another step forward, his hands reaching out instinctively. "I'm sorry," he whispered, voice cracking. "I'm so sorry, Jungkook. I didn't want it to be like this. I swear." His fingers brushed against Jungkook's arm, hesitant and feather-light. Jungkook stepped back, the movement sharp and deliberate. Jimin's hands fell to his sides, eyes widening with hurt. Jungkook's gaze was hard, unyielding. "Sorry isn't enough," he murmured, voice tight and strained. "Not this time." Jimin's lips parted, a plea dancing on the tip of his tongue. But before he could speak, the door swung open with a loud creak. Both of them turned, startled, to see Taehyung standing in the doorway, his expression shadowed and unreadable. He stepped inside, letting the door swing shut behind him, eyes locked on Jungkook. "I figured you'd be here," Taehyung said, his voice steady but edged with tension. His gaze flicked to Jimin, who took a half step back, his eyes dropping to the floor. Taehyung's expression softened just slightly before he turned back to Jungkook. I think we all need to talk. Properly this time. Jungkook crossed his arms over his chest, eyes narrowing. Talk? About what? More lies? More excuses? His voice was sharp, cutting through the silence like a blade. Taehyung's jaw clenched, but he didn't back down. He stepped further into the room, closing the distance between them. No, no more lies. His voice was firm, his eyes steady. You want the truth? Fine, I'll give it to you. All of it. Jungkook's eyes flickered with surprise, the edge of his stance softening just slightly. He swallowed, the tension in his throat refusing to fade. Then start talking. Taehyung took a breath, running a hand through his hair before he spoke. It wasn't planned. Okay? None of it was. Jimin and I, we just... He glanced at Jimin, who nodded slightly, his eyes still fixed on the floor. We just started spending more time together. First, it was just practice. Late nights, working on routines. But then it grew into something else. Jungkook's fists clenched tighter, the words hitting like tiny shards of glass. He forced himself to keep his voice steady. So you shut me out? Just like that? Like I didn't matter anymore? Taehyung shook his head fiercely. No, that's not how it was. We didn't know how to handle it. We didn't want you to feel like you were third-wheeling. We thought it would hurt you. Jungkook let out a bitter laugh, sharp and jagged. So you hurt me anyway. That's your justification. Jimin stepped forward then, his eyes red-rimmed and desperate. It wasn't supposed to happen like this, he whispered, voice breaking. You were never supposed to feel this way. You're important to us. You always have been. His hands shook at his sides, and he looked up, meeting Jungkook's gaze for the first time that evening. We were just scared of ruining everything. Jungkook's eyes burned, the weight of their words pressing heavy against his chest. You already did. His voice cracked, but he held his ground. You ruined it the second you decided I didn't need to know. Taehyung's eyes filled with something raw and desperate. We can fix this, he murmured, voice barely above a whisper. We can make it right. Jungkook stared at him, disbelief etched into every line of his face. How? He demanded, voice rising. How do you make this right? You can't just erase what happened. You can't just pretend like you didn't lie to me, like you didn't make me feel like I was nothing. His voice broke, and he turned away, fists clenching at his sides. You can't fix that. Jimin's eyes filled with tears again, and he stepped forward, voice shaking. Please, Jungkook, give us a chance. Let us try. Jungkook's shoulders tensed, his eyes still fixed on the window. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating, before he finally turned back around. His eyes were red-rimmed, voice shaking. You get one chance, he murmured, voice cracking. Just one. If you screw it up again, I'm done. Jimin sucked in a breath, eyes wide with hope. Taehyung's fists unclenched, his expression softening with something like relief. Jungkook stared at them both, the tension still coiled tight in his chest, but something else flickering in his eyes. Hope, fragile and unsteady, but still burning. For now, that was enough. But deep down, where shadows lingered and old wounds refused to heal, Jungkook knew that trust wasn't something that could be fixed with words alone. It had to be earned back piece by broken piece. And he wasn't sure if either of them were strong enough to do it. The rain battered against the windows of the studio, streaking the glass with rivulets of water that distorted the cityscape beyond. Jungkook sat cross-legged on the wooden floor, his back pressed against the mirrored wall. His head was tilted back, eyes closed, chest rising and falling with measured breaths, as he tried to steady the storm raging inside him. The conversation from 2 weeks ago still lingered, etched into his memory like scars that refused to fade. One chance, he had told them. One chance to make things right. The door creaked open, and footsteps shuffled inside. Jungkook didn't open his eyes, but he knew who it was. He recognized the pattern of footsteps, the soft tread that Taehyung always had, the slight drag of Jimin's left heel. They were familiar in a way that was both comforting and agonizing. "You're early?" Taehyung's voice cut through the silence, soft and uncertain. Jungkook's eyes fluttered open, meeting Taehyung's gaze in the mirror. His expression was cautious, like he was afraid one wrong word would shatter the fragile truce they'd established. Jungkook shrugged, his eyes slipping away from Taehyung's reflection. "Couldn't sleep." His voice was flat, devoid of emotion, but it still hung heavy in the room. Jimin stepped further inside, setting his bag down gently before moving towards the window. He leaned against the glass, his palms pressed flat against it as he stared out at the rain. "It's been like this all week," he murmured, voice distant. "Feels like it's never gonna stop." Jungkook watched him in the mirror, eyes tracing the curve of his shoulders, the way his breath fogged up the glass. "Maybe it won't," Jungkook replied, his voice barely above a whisper. Taehyung cleared his throat, breaking the tension. "We should get started," he said, forcing a brightness into his voice that felt brittle and hollow. He walked to the speaker, plugging in his phone, the familiar beat of their choreography thrumming through the room. He turned back, offering a tight smile. "Ready?" Jungkook didn't respond, but he pushed himself up from the floor, his body aching with the weight of exhaustion. Jimin moved away from the window, his expression smoothing into something neutral, guarded. The three of them fell into position, years of muscle memory clicking into place. The music picked up and they began. For a while, there was nothing but the rhythm of their footsteps, the steady beat of the music, and the quiet shuffle of movement. It was familiar, comforting even. But as the song neared its crescendo, the tension that had been simmering beneath the surface snapped. Jungkook missed a step, his foot catching on the floor, and he stumbled, nearly crashing into Jimin. Jimin's hands shot out, grabbing his arm to steady him. "You okay?" he asked, eyes wide with concern. Jungkook jerked his arm away, the touch too intimate, too familiar. His eyes flashed with something raw. "I'm fine," he snapped, straightening himself. "Let's just keep going." Taehyung exchanged a glance with Jimin, his mouth pressing into a thin line. "Maybe we should take a break," he suggested carefully, but Jungkook shook his head fiercely. "No." Jungkook's voice was sharp, almost a growl. "I said I'm fine. Let's just do it again." His eyes were hard, unyielding, and for a moment, neither Taehyung nor Jimin moved. Then, reluctantly, they fell back into formation. The music restarted, and Jungkook threw himself into the choreography with a desperation that bordered on reckless. His movements were sharp, almost violent, every step punctuated with force. Sweat slicked his forehead, his breath coming faster and faster, but he didn't stop. He wouldn't stop. Jimin moved closer during a transition, his hands brushing against Jungkook's arm. "Slow down," he whispered, voice barely audible over the music. "You're gonna hurt yourself." Jungkook's eyes snapped to his, blazing with defiance. "Why do you care?" he shot back, voice cold and sharp. The words hung in the air, slicing through the music, and Jimin's expression crumpled just slightly before he forced it back into place. Taehyung stepped forward, his voice tight. "That's enough." He reached out, grabbing Jungkook's arm firmly. "You need to stop." Jungkook wrenched his arm away, eyes flaring with something dangerous. "Don't touch me," he spat, voice low and trembling with rage. His chest heaved, sweat dripping down his temples. "Don't act like you care now." Taehyung's jaw clenched, his eyes hardening. "We do care," he replied, voice steely. "We always did. You just refused to see it." Jungkook let out a sharp laugh, the sound echoing off the walls. "Right? That's why you two spent months pretending I didn't exist. That's why you lied to my face." He took a step forward, eyes blazing. "You think saying sorry fixes that? You think just because you care, it means I'm supposed to forget everything?" Jimin's eyes shimmered with tears, his voice cracking. "We're trying, Jungkook. We're trying to make it right. But you have to meet us halfway." His voice was pleading, desperate. Jungkook's hands shook at his sides, his breath coming out in ragged bursts. I'm here, aren't I? He shot back. I'm standing right here. But it's not enough, is it? It's never enough. His voice wavered, and his fists clenched tighter. You two have each other. I'm just the extra. Jimin's eyes widened, and he shook his head fiercely. You're not the extra. You've never been. Don't lie to me. Jungkook shouted, voice cracking with emotion. His hands were shaking, and he forced them into his pockets, trying to hide it. I saw the way you two looked at each other. I heard the whispers. I'm not blind. His voice softened, breaking. I'm not blind. The silence that followed was suffocating, pressing against them like a physical weight. Taehyung took a step forward, his voice gentle but firm. We messed up, he admitted, eyes locking onto Jungkook's. We hurt you, but we never wanted to lose you. He swallowed, his voice dropping to a whisper. We still don't. Jungkook's eyes shimmered with unshed tears, his breath coming out in jagged bursts. He turned away, his hands covering his face as he struggled to compose himself. The weight of it all was too much. The lies, the betrayal, the sense of isolation that clawed at him every time he saw them together. His shoulders shook, and he sucked in a ragged breath, willing himself to hold it together. Jimin stepped forward, his voice soft. Please, he whispered, his hand reaching out, trembling. Please don't walk away. Jungkook didn't turn around. He didn't move. He just stood there, eyes shut tight, hands pressed against his face. His voice, when it finally came, was broken and raw. I don't know how to forgive you, he whispered, his voice cracking. I don't know if I can. Jimin's hand hovered just behind Jungkook's shoulder, inches away but feeling like miles. His eyes filled with tears, spilling over unchecked. Then let us help you try. The rain continued to fall outside, relentless and unyielding, whispering against the glass like a heartbeat. And for the first time, Jungkook let himself feel it. The pain, the hurt, the betrayal. He let it wash over him, raw and unfiltered. And in that moment, something shifted, fragile and tentative, but real. Maybe forgiveness wasn't a single choice. Maybe it was 1,000 small decisions made day by day, moment by moment. And maybe, just maybe, they could learn to find their way back. Or maybe it would all fall apart. But at that moment, with the rain whispering promises of something new, Jungkook decided he was willing to try. The sun dipped low on the horizon, bleeding hues of crimson and gold across the Seoul skyline. The light filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the practice room, casting long, stretching shadows that danced across the wooden floorboards. Jungkook stood alone, his reflection staring back at him from the mirrored wall, eyes hollow and lips pressed into a thin line. His chest rose and fell with each steady breath, but the storm within him refused to settle. He had agreed to try, to let Taehyung and Jimin back in, but the cracks were still there, jagged and unhealed. The door creaked open behind him, and he saw their reflections enter before he heard their footsteps. Jimin first, his hands tucked nervously into the pockets of his oversized hoodie, eyes downcast. Taehyung followed, his expression guarded but resolute, jaw set as if bracing for impact. Jungkook's eyes flickered to the mirror, watching them approach, but he didn't turn around. Hey! Jimin's voice was soft, tentative, like he was afraid to break something fragile. Jungkook's shoulders tensed, but he nodded, his eyes never leaving his own reflection. Taehyung stepped closer, his presence looming just behind Jungkook. You came early, he noted, voice steady. Jungkook gave a curt nod, his hands clenching and unclenching at his sides. I needed the time to think, Jungkook replied, his voice flat and devoid of emotion. He finally turned, his eyes locking onto theirs. Jimin flinched slightly under the intensity of Jungkook's gaze, while Taehyung met it head-on, unyielding. What are we doing here? Jungkook asked, voice sharp and clear. We keep coming back to this room, saying the same things, doing the same dances, pretending everything's fine. It's not fine. His fists clenched, knuckles white. You two are together. I'm just standing in the way. Jimin's eyes widened, and he shook his head fiercely. "No, that's not true," he cried, voice cracking. He stepped forward, desperation written across his features. "You're not in the way. You've never been in the way." Jungkook let out a bitter laugh, sharp and hollow. "Really? Because it sure feels like I'm just the third wheel in this, whatever this is." His eyes flicked to Taehyung, sharp and accusing. "You never even gave me a chance to understand. You just shut me out." Taehyung's jaw clenched, his eyes darkening. "We tried to protect you," he said, voice steady but edged with tension. "We didn't want you to get hurt." Jungkook's laugh grew louder, sharper. "Well, congratulations. You failed." He took a step forward, his fists still clenched. "You talk about protecting me, but all you did was lie. You pretended everything was fine while you left me out in the cold." His voice dropped, eyes flashing with betrayal. "You both lied to my face." Jimin's hands twisted together, his eyes shimmering with tears. "We were scared," he whispered, voice shaking. "We didn't know how to tell you. We didn't want you to feel." His voice broke, and he turned away, pressing the heels of his hands to his eyes. Jungkook watched him, chest heaving with restrained emotion. His gaze moved to Taehyung, whose expression had hardened, eyes sharp and unyielding. "And you?" Jungkook demanded, voice cracking. "Were you scared too? Or did you just not care?" Taehyung flinched, his fists clenching at his sides. "You think I didn't care?" he shot back, voice rising. "I cared too much. That's why I didn't tell you. I knew you'd be hurt. I knew it would tear everything apart." His eyes flashed with anger and something deeper, regret. "But maybe we were wrong. Maybe we should have told you from the start." Jungkook stepped closer, eyes blazing. "Damn right you should have." His voice shook, hands trembling. "I thought we were brothers. I thought there was nothing we couldn't tell each other." His breath came out in ragged bursts. "But you shut me out. Both of you." Jimin stepped forward again, his hands reaching out, shaking. "We're trying to make it right," he whispered, eyes pleading. "We're trying, Jungkook. Can't you see that?" Jungkook looked at him, really looked, and his expression softened just slightly. His fists unclenched, and he exhaled shakily. "Then prove it," he murmured, voice rough with emotion. "Show me I'm still a part of this. Not just in words. I need to see it." His eyes flicked between them, dark and unyielding. "If you can't do that, then maybe I'm not meant to be here." Jimin's breath hitched, and his eyes filled with fresh tears. He reached out, his hand clasping Jungkook's wrist, firm and unyielding. "You are meant to be here," he whispered fiercely, voice shaking. "With us. Always." Jungkook stared at him, and for a moment, the room was silent. His eyes flicked to Taehyung, who nodded, stepping forward. "We want you here," Taehyung added, voice steady and sure. "We're not the same without you." Jungkook's gaze dropped to their hands. Jimin's fingers wrapped tightly around his wrist, Taehyung's hand resting firmly on his shoulder. The sincerity in their eyes was raw, unfiltered. He swallowed hard, his defenses cracking just slightly. "Okay," he whispered, voice barely audible. "Then let's try." The words hung in the air, fragile but real. And for the first time in weeks, something shifted. The tension in the room softened, unraveling just slightly. Jimin let out a breath he didn't realize he was holding, and Taehyung's shoulders relaxed, his eyes glimmering with something that looked almost like hope. Jungkook pulled his hand away gently, running his fingers through his hair. "But I swear," he continued, voice stronger now, eyes hardening. "If you shut me out again, I'm gone. No second chances." His gaze locked onto theirs, unyielding. "Understand?" Jimin nodded instantly, his eyes shimmering with determination. "We understand," he whispered, voice firm. Taehyung's expression hardened, and he stepped forward, extending his hand. "Deal?" Jungkook stared at the outstretched hand, hesitation flickering in his eyes before he reached out, clasping it firmly. "Deal." The rain outside had stopped, leaving the city gleaming with fresh light. The three of them stood there, hands clasped together, the tension that had choked them for so long unraveling bit by bit. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't whole. But it was real, and for now that was enough. They trained for hours after that, sweat pouring down their faces, breath heaving. But for the first time in months, the rhythm felt right. Their movements synchronized, sharp and seamless, just like before. Laughter filled the room, punctuated with teasing jabs and soft smiles. Felt like something familiar, something real. But even as they moved together, hearts pounding with exertion and joy, Jungkook couldn't shake the whisper of doubt curling in the back of his mind. Trust was fragile, and while he wanted to believe things could go back to the way they were, shadows still lingered, clinging to the edges of their laughter. He knew the real test hadn't come yet, and when it did, he wasn't sure if any of them would be ready for it. The city glittered outside the practice room windows, neon lights casting fractured colors across the glass. Jungkook leaned against the wall, his breathing uneven, chest heaving from the intensity of the dance routine. His shirt clung to his back, sweat trickling down his temples. He wiped his face with the hem of his shirt, eyes squinting at his reflection. Jimin and Taehyung were in the opposite corner, heads close together, whispering something he couldn't make out. The familiar tightness coiled in his stomach, sour and suffocating. He tried to focus on his own movements, stretching out his sore muscles, but his gaze kept slipping back to them. They had been better recently, more inclusive, trying to repair the trust they'd broken. But the insecurity still gnawed at him, relentless and unforgiving. Jungkook forced himself to look away, pulling his phone from his pocket and scrolling mindlessly. A message popped up on his screen, Yoongi, asking about his solo practice. He didn't reply. A wave of exhaustion rolled through him, and he leaned his head back against the wall, eyes slipping shut. Hey! The voice was close, softer than he expected. Jungkook opened his eyes to find Taehyung standing over him, a bottle of water extended. Jungkook took it wordlessly, unscrewing the cap and taking a long gulp. Taehyung didn't move, just watched him with that familiar intensity that always made his skin prickle. You okay? Taehyung asked, his voice low. Jungkook wiped his mouth with the back of his hand, shrugging. I'm fine, he replied, trying to sound indifferent. He knew his voice didn't quite hit the mark. Taehyung didn't buy it. He lowered himself to sit next to Jungkook, close enough that their knees bumped. You've been quiet, he noted, eyes flickering with concern. Is something still bothering you? Jungkook gritted his teeth, forcing himself to keep his gaze fixed on the floor. I said I'm fine. The lie tasted bitter on his tongue. He knew Taehyung wasn't stupid. He could see through the facade easily. Jimin joined them, his steps soft and cautious. We're worried about you, he admitted, his hands fidgeting nervously. You've been distant again. Jungkook clenched his jaw, forcing a laugh that came out rough and hollow. Yeah? Guess I learned from the best. Taehyung's expression hardened, a flash of guilt crossing his face. We deserved that, he muttered. Jungkook let out a frustrated breath, running his hands through his hair. You two are acting like everything's fine now, like we're just gonna snap back to normal because you apologized. It's not that easy. Jimin bit his lip, stepping closer. We know that, he whispered. But we're trying, Jungkook. We're trying so hard to fix this. To fix us. Jungkook looked at him, anger flickering in his eyes. And what am I supposed to do? Just forget how it felt to be left out? To be the last one to know that my best friends are together? You didn't just hurt me. You broke us. Taehyung's hand twitched, like he wanted to reach out but didn't dare. We know. We know we broke your trust. But pushing us away isn't going to fix it either. Jungkook scoffed, pushing off the wall and taking a few steps forward, putting distance between them. I'm not pushing you away. I'm just trying to figure out where I stand now. You too. He swallowed hard, unable to meet their eyes. You two fit. You're together. And I'm just the extra. Jimin moved forward, his hands shaking. Stop saying that. You're not an extra. You're our friend. You're part of this too. Jungkook spun around, his voice rising. Then why do I feel like I'm on the outside? Why do I feel like I don't belong anymore? his fists clenched, nails digging into his palms. I tried to forgive. I tried to move on. But every time I see you two like this, whispering, looking at each other like that, it hurts. Taehyung stood abruptly, his own frustration finally cracking through his calm. What do you want from us, Jungkook? We can't change what happened. We can't undo it. We're trying to include you. We're trying to make you feel wanted. Isn't that enough? Jungkook's eyes flashed with something raw, something vulnerable. I want to feel like I matter, like I'm not just a leftover piece from before you two got together. Jimin's shoulders shook, tears pooling in his eyes. You do matter. We've never once thought of you as less. We didn't know how to handle it. We thought we could balance it all without losing you. Jungkook let out a shuddering breath, his anger bleeding into something softer, something more painful. But you did lose me, he whispered. You lost me the second you decided I wasn't important enough to know the truth. Taehyung's jaw clenched, his eyes darkening with regret. Silence wrapped around them, thick and suffocating. Taehyung's hands dropped to his sides, helplessness etched into his features. Jimin stepped closer, cautiously reaching out. We should have chosen all of us. We were stupid. We were selfish. But we're here now and we're not giving up on you. Jungkook's heart thudded painfully, his vision blurring. He wanted to believe them, wanted to trust again, but the ache was still too fresh. I don't know if I can go back to how it was. Jimin's lip trembled and he looked to Taehyung for support. Taehyung took a deep breath, his voice softer than before. Then let's make something new. We don't have to go back. We can move forward. All three of us. We'll figure it out. Jungkook hesitated, his defenses wavering. He looked at them, really looked, and saw the fear, the guilt, the love. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't healed. But it was real. His shoulders dropped and he wiped his face roughly. I'm scared, he admitted, voice breaking. Scared that I'm just gonna keep feeling like this. That no matter what, I'll always be on the outside. Jimin reached out, finally daring to touch his shoulder. You're not. We won't let that happen. We'll do better. We'll do anything it takes to make you feel like you belong. Taehyung moved closer, placing his hand on Jungkook's other shoulder. We don't want to lose you. Not now. Not ever. Jungkook closed his eyes, the warmth of their hands grounding him, the weight of their words settling into his heart. It wasn't a resolution. It wasn't a perfect fix. But it was a start. Taking a shaky breath, Jungkook whispered, okay. The three of them stood there, bound by the mistakes of the past but determined to forge something stronger, something unbreakable. For the first time in weeks, Jungkook let himself believe that maybe they could rebuild, not as they were before, but as something new, something that could withstand the storms yet to come. The evening sky stretched wide and pale, clouds threading through the fading sunlight like whispers of secrets long unspoken. Jungkook stood at the edge of the rooftop, his hands gripping the cold metal railing as the wind whipped against his cheeks. The city sprawled below him, glittering with neon lights and the hum of life that never seemed to sleep. His breath came out in short, even bursts, the chill biting at his lungs, grounding him. This rooftop had always been his sanctuary, a place to escape the noise, to clear his head. But tonight, it felt different. Heavy. Suffocating. Footsteps echoed behind him, soft and deliberate. Jungkook didn't turn, he knew who it was. He could always tell. The air shifted slightly and he heard the familiar rustle of a jacket, the hesitant pause before the voice came. Jungkook. Taehyung's voice was steady, but Jungkook caught the tremor beneath it. He squeezed the railing tighter, knuckles whitening. What are you doing here? Jungkook asked, his voice flat and edged with something sharp. He didn't turn around. Taehyung took a few steps closer, stopping just short of the railing, his breath fogging in the crisp air. I was looking for you. You missed practice. There was concern laced in his tone, a softness that Jungkook couldn't ignore. Jungkook exhaled slowly, his shoulders stiffening. Yeah, he replied, voice barely audible over the rush of wind. I needed space. Taehyung hesitated and then Jungkook heard the soft thud of his back hitting the railing as Taehyung leaned beside him, their shoulders just inches apart. I get that, Taehyung murmured, his gaze fixed on the city lights below. Sometimes space is all that makes sense. Jungkook finally turned to look at him, eyes sharp and guarded. You would know, wouldn't you? You're good at creating space. Between us. Between everything. Taehyung flinched, his expression tightening. I know, he whispered, voice barely carried by the wind. I know I did that. I thought it would make things easier. I was wrong. Jungkook studied him for a moment, searching his face for any hint of insincerity. He found none. Taehyung's eyes were dark, glassy with regret, mouth pressed into a hard line. Jungkook's grip on the railing loosened just slightly. You really hurt me, he admitted, voice cracking. You and Jimin, you broke something. Taehyung's eyes shimmered, his breath coming out shakier now. I know, he repeated, his hands clenching at his sides. And I'm sorry. I don't know how many times I have to say it before you believe me, but I am. His voice was rough, edged with desperation. I never wanted to hurt you. I didn't know how to make it work. Jungkook turned fully to face him now, eyes blazing with emotion. You didn't even try, he shouted, voice cracking through the empty air. His fists shook and he let go of the railing, stepping closer. You just shut me out. You left me there to figure it out on my own. Do you know what that felt like? To watch you two drift away and not even know why. Taehyung's expression crumpled and he opened his mouth to speak, but Jungkook cut him off. You didn't even trust me enough to tell me the truth. His voice softened, raw and wounded. I would have understood, you know. I would have tried. His eyes were glassy and he blinked rapidly, fighting back the tears that threatened to spill over. Taehyung's hands reached out, hesitant, shaking. He placed them on Jungkook's shoulders, his grip firm and grounding. You're right. I should have told you. We should have told you. His voice cracked, the vulnerability spilling over. I was scared. Scared that if I told you, you'd hate me. That you'd walk away. Jungkook let out a shuddering breath, his shoulders trembling beneath Taehyung's grip. I did walk away, he whispered, voice cracking. Because you pushed me out. Taehyung's eyes closed briefly, the pain flickering across his face like a shadow. He opened them again, gaze locking onto Jungkook's. Let me make it right, he whispered, voice breaking. Please. Jungkook stared at him, the hurt still simmering, but something else flickered there too, hope. Fragile and tentative, but real. He swallowed hard, nodding slowly. I don't know how we fix this, he admitted, voice cracking. But I want to try. Taehyung's breath left him in a rush, relief softening the tension in his shoulders. He pulled Jungkook in suddenly, arms wrapping around him tightly, fiercely, as if letting go wasn't an option. Jungkook stiffened at first, his body going rigid with surprise, but then he relaxed, his hands coming up to grip Taehyung's back, fingers curling into the fabric of his jacket. He let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding, the tension slipping away just a bit. They stood like that for a long time, the city stretching out beneath them, endless and bright. When Taehyung finally pulled back, his eyes were red-rimmed, but he was smiling soft and genuine. Come on, he said, voice still thick with emotion. Jimin's waiting downstairs. He's been freaking out since you missed practice. Jungkook's eyes softened, the edges of his mouth twitching up into a tentative smile. He always freaks out, he murmured, shaking his head. Taehyung chuckled, nodding. Yeah. But he's been worse lately. He rubbed the back of his neck, glancing away. I think he's scared you won't come back. Jungkook's smile faded and he looked down at his hands, the reality of it settling in his chest like a weight. I wasn't sure I would, he admitted, voice low. Taehyung's hand found his shoulder again, firm and reassuring. But you're here now. That's what matters. Jungkook nodded, his chest tightening with something he couldn't name. He followed Taehyung back through the rooftop door, the sound of their footsteps echoing in the stairwell. As they descended, Jungkook's heart thudded heavily in his chest, anticipation curling in his stomach. When they reached the lobby, Jimin was pacing back and forth, his hands wringing together, eyes wide and anxious. He looked up as they approached, relief flooding his features. Jungkook, he exclaimed, rushing forward. Before Jungkook could react, Jimin's arms were around him, squeezing tightly. You scared the hell out of me, Jimin mumbled into his shoulder, voice cracking. Jungkook hesitated, then wrapped his arms around Jimin, patting his back awkwardly. I'm here, he whispered. I'm not going anywhere. Jimin pulled back, his eyes glimmering with tears. He sniffed, swiping at his face with the back of his hand. Good, he murmured, his smile shaky but genuine. I was starting to think I'd have to drag you back. Taehyung chuckled beside them, the sound light and unburdened. You probably would have, he teased, and Jungkook rolled his eyes. For the first time in what felt like forever, the three of them laughed together, real and unrestrained. And in that moment, something settled, a crack mended, a bridge rebuilt. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't whole. But it was a start. Jungkook glanced between them, his heart lighter than it had been in weeks. Let's not mess this up again, he said, voice steady. Taehyung and Jimin both nodded, their expressions solemn and resolute. We won't, Jimin promised, his eyes shimmering with conviction. We won't. And for the first time, Jungkook let himself believe that maybe, just maybe, they wouldn't.